Hello, my name is Nicole Riedel, and I'm going to be examining the influence of river-lake interaction on the drought and water resources in the Poyang Lake Basin. First, let's look at the location of the Poyang River Lake Basin and some other facts about the basin. So first, it is located in southeast China. In this region, it takes up a big part of China. It is located on the southern bank of the lower Yangtze River. It is the largest freshwater lake in China, and it is unfortunately decreasing in size over the years. The water level of the Poyang Lake Basin mostly depends on the watershed runoff and the tributary rivers that create inflow to the river basin. The normal area is 3,585 square kilometers, and at the smallest time recorded, the Poyang Lake Basin was at 1,326 square kilometers. So, why do we care about this study, and what is the importance, and what can we learn from it? So, the study started because there was severe water shortages of the Poyang Lake, and it was starting to cause a concern. One of the concerns was that the Three Gorge Dam could be responsible for the low water levels and the shortages of the water supply. One thing we can learn from this study is what river-lake interaction is and how it is significant and the importance of it and how we could learn about our rivers and lakes and how they interact with each other and correspond. So let's look at what river-lake interaction means. Here in this box, this represents the inflow to the Poyang Lake. So the Poyang Lake has a few subbasins and tributary rivers that create inflow to the lake. So all these annual mean stream flows, all this added together is the inflow to the lake. Here in this box is the water exchange between the Yangtze River and the Poyang Lake. So this is just measured at one station, and it shows the annual mean stream flow between the river and the lake. The Yangtze River is the number one tributary to the Poyang Lake. Here in this box, we have the variability of the Yangtze River. It has an upper, middle, and a lower, and the water levels vary between seasons and times of month and different variabilities. So here we have the variability of the Yangtze River. So this case study wanted to answer three big questions. The three questions were, how regular are the extreme droughts in the Poyang Lake Basin, and how do they affect the supply of water resources? Another question they wanted to answer was, how does the low stream flow of the Yangtze River affect the water levels and water supply of the Poyang Lake? The last question they wanted to get answered is there a difference in the correlation of the Yangtze River and Poyang Lake before and after the impoundment of the Three Gorges Dam? So in the next few slides, I will be going over the methodology of the study and the results of each of the questions. The first method used was the Standardized Precipitation Index, also known as SPI. SPI is a drought index based on the probability of an observed precipitation deficit occurring over a given period of time. It is useful for monitoring dry and wet periods and comparing climatic conditions of different hydrologic regimes. Most SPIs are on a 1 to 36 month range. In this specific case, the study is using a 24-month range for the SPI. The four categories for the droughts are mild, moderate, severe, and extreme drought. So what exactly is the SPI equation and its components? So here is the equation to figure out the drought magnitude. So M represents the drought magnitude, D is the drought duration, which is in months. SPI is on a scale of -1.0, which is used for the beginning and the end of a drought, and negative 2.0 is to classify extreme droughts. I is the sequential month of a time series of a drought. Another method used is the empirical orthogonal function, or EOF. It is used to analyze the main drought features of spatial and temporal variability in the Poyang Lake Basin. It is a statistical technique, and it linearly transforms an original set of variables into a substantially small set of uncorrelated variables representing most of the information of the original set of variables. So the goal of this function is to reduce the dimensionality of the original data set. In the next few slides, I will go over the results of the study and the answers to the 3 questions. As a recap, the 3 questions were: how regular are the extreme droughts in the Poyang Lake Basin, and how do they affect the supply of water resources? How does the low stream flow of the Yangtze River affect the water levels and the water supply of the Poyang Lake? And is there a difference in the correlation of the Yangtze River and the Poyang Lake before and after the impoundment of the Three Gorges Dam? So here's the answer to question 1, which is how regular are the extreme droughts in the Poyang Lake Basin and how do they affect the supply of the water resources? So as we can see from the SPI and the SRI values, we have 6 observed droughts, which the worst being in 1960s and 2000s. So here we have an SPI value of -1 with up to a 1, and then goes down in 1960 to -2, and so on and so forth. So these values would be the extreme droughts, and these would be the times of no droughts. So again, the worst droughts in 1960s and 2000s. So we can look at this table, and it shows us the duration for each drought and the magnitude, which the equation was explained in the earlier slide. So the longest duration was 1963 to 1967, which lasted 45 months. And after that, we had the drought in 2007 to 2009 that lasted 35 months. The magnitude of the worst drought was -172, and closely following the magnitude of the 2000 drought, which was -129. So here we can compare the SPI and SRI values. So continuing to answer question 1, we have the comparison of inflow and outflow during the 6 observed droughts. So these graphs show the anomalies compared, which are the accumulated lake inflow and lake outflow compared to the reference period of 1956 to 2009. So negative anomalies mean that it was lower than average, and higher anomalies mean that they or above 0 means that they were greater than the average. So of course, for the 6 recorded droughts, the anomalies are going to be in the negative because there was less water supply. So we're going to have negative anomalies, meaning we had less inflow and outflow. So here in the 1960s drought, we can see that the outflow was severely negative, meaning there was very little outflow compared to the average, along with the inflow. We can see that over most of the droughts have pretty significant negative anomalies for both the inflow and outflow. In the late 2000s, we have still negative anomalies for the inflow and outflow, but they're not as significant as the 1960s drought and later in the 1980s. So this just is a comparison of the inflow and the outflow of the observed droughts and how they compare with the average inflow and outflow. So to answer question 2, which was how does the low stream flow of the Yangtze River affect the water levels and the water supply of the Poyang Lake? So this graph here shows the accumulated monthly stream flow anomalies compared with the average in the Yangtze River Basin. The inflow and outflow of the lake show the water balance, of the Poyang Lake, which is our question. How does the low stream flow of the Yangtze River affect the water levels in the water supply of the Poyang Lake? So let's talk about the two major droughts, the two worst droughts that were observed in this area. So we have the 1960s and the 2000s. So what we can see here is that it's inconsistent because in 1960s there was a decrease in the inflow and the outflow of the lake, even though the Yangtze River water levels were still high. But when we look at the droughts in the 2000s, we have an increase of the inflow and the outflow of the lake, while there's a slight decrease in the water levels of the Yangtze River. So they're inconsistent and they don't really correlate to or what we would expect. So to answer question 3, which is there a difference in the correlation of the Yangtze River and Poyang Lake before and after the impoundment of the Three Gorges Dam? So what we do know is that the operation of the TGD has affected the seasonal variations of the Poyang Lake and the Yangtze River. If you think about it, a dam would be interrupting the natural course of a river and the inflows and the outflows, so it's going to affect the seasonal variations of the lake and river. It is evident that the strongest influence is when the TGD impounds every year. Our evidence to support this is that the impounding of the TDG lasted from September 20th to October 28, 2006, and it raised the water level from 135 meters to 156 meters. It also caused 3 billion meters cubes of water to flow from Poyang Lake to the Yangtze River, which would have severely dropped the water level of the Poyang Lake. It also caused the lake inflow and water level for the 6 droughts, and they had different behaviors before and after the TGD impounding. So to continue question 3, we have some graphs that show the cumulative probabilities of stream flow and water levels for before the impoundment of the Three Gorges Dam and post-impoundment of the Three Gorges Dam in the 2 different periods in the Poyang Lake and the lower Yangtze River. So this again is showing the stream flow of the Poyang Lake, the inflow. So before the impoundment, it was slightly increasing here at this amount, and after it was obviously decreased. So we can see that for the different hydrological stations. Here again we have before and after. It's an obvious decrease in water level and stream flow from before and after. So we can see here that the impoundment greatly affects the water levels and the inflow and outflow of the Poyang Lake. So in conclusion, it still remains unknown whether the shortage of water in the Poyang Lake is a trend or if it's just a shift, and it's still unknown if the TGD contributes to the low water levels. What we do know is that low water levels at the Poyang Lake are in conjunction to the extreme droughts, meaning that the extreme droughts cause the low levels of the Poyang Lake, and those two variables correspond with each other. Another thing that we do know is the operations of the TGD has altered the seasonal pattern of flow regimes in the lower Yangtze River. And there is more studies that need to be done and look further into the Three Gorges Dam and how those affect the water levels of the Poyang Lake Basin and the Yangtze River. More studies need to go into the correlations of the Yangtze River and the River Lake, or the Poyang River Basin, and how rivers and lakes interact with each other. This study was one of the first of its kind, and we'll slowly have more studies done about this subject and hope that we could learn more about how our rivers and lakes are connected and how different dams and constructions will also affect our lakes and rivers. Thank you.